All right, my friends, good morning. Time for the hands-free drive to work. Look, you know you can keep your hands on the wheel while you steer yourself from home to work. So ultimately, we can steer ourselves well once we get there. We've been talking about the three principles that we need if we're going to do great work, if we're going to lead ourselves well, or if we're going to manage ourselves well. The three things we need to do is act differently, think differently, and then bridge that gap between our thinking and our acting by deciding differently. If we want different results in our lives, ultimately we cannot get those different results unless we learn to act differently. But we know we'll never act differently until we learn to think differently. And we know that we'll never get from our thinking to our acting unless we find that bridge and learn to decide differently. And really with our quest, we've learned three questions to go with them. With our thinking, it's just asking in our work, what is the guiding purpose of my work? When I center myself on the guiding purpose of my work and follow that guide, then it actually helps me think differently. If I ask the second question, which is who achieves that purpose from question one, that helps me decide differently. And then last, I say, how do they actually do it? What are the practical things? What is something I can start doing today differently than I've ever done before? That'll help me act differently. Those are the three questions it's trying to help us think, decide, and act like we never have before to really ultimately steer ourselves. That's what we're trying to do, is be able to manage ourselves. We spent a couple decades in the material that's popular in how to lead others. But really, what I've discovered is a lot of us are still struggling to lead ourselves. I can't get me to do what I want me to do. I know how to get other people to do what I want them to do. I still need to learn how to get me to do what I want me to do. And so that's what we're talking about, is self-management. And really today's video is just from category number 3. How do I act differently? How do I act differently? And so these act as maybe like little signposts that I'm passing right now that said speed limit 55 miles per hour. I know that if my thinking and my decision making was all clicking on all cylinders right now, really I wouldn't need that sign. Think about that. I would not need the sign to remind me to go 55 miles per hour only, because I know I can see the conditions. I see the people around me. I'm thinking about not just myself and how do I get to work and where I need to go, but I'm thinking about all the people around me and how to keep everybody in the community safe, not just my clients and not just my customers, but also the communities that surround us. See, if I'm seeing all that, I don't need that 55 miles per hour. I just need to continue to meet that guiding purpose of work, and I need to continue to become the kind of person that does so, but I really don't need the sign. But I know, we all know, we get busy, we get rushed, we get tired, we get frustrated. So the signs act as a quick reminder. Hey, don't forget. I saw one the other day when I was driving. It said, don't jump off the bridge. If you're thinking straight and you're deciding correctly, you don't need the sign that says don't jump off this bridge. But if you're not, you need this reminder to say, hey, don't forget. And that's what these signs act like. They help us to change our actions even while we're changing our thinking and our decision making. Does that make sense? It's awesome. So today's signpost for action. Signpost for action today is reach across barriers. Reach across barriers. And this is absolutely, this is relevant. We have a glaring barrier in our country, and that's race. And so I just want to talk about two things. It's not the only barrier, though. There are tons of different barriers. Sex is a barrier sometimes, that males and females at work, sometimes they don't, we don't work together, or we don't hire across that barrier, or sometimes it's even within disciplines. Sometimes we get so focused if we are, a scientific mind, that we don't take into account social studies, or if we're a qualitative mind, we don't take into account the quantitative. We don't take into account the numbers. Or if we're a numbers guy or numbers girl, we don't take into account the qualitative aspect. We don't see a lot of stock in somebody's feelings, but we just want to see the numbers. And so a lot of times there are these barriers that exist in our work environments. Like I said, there's one right now that's glaring, and so I think that's why we need to think about this, is reaching across barriers can absolutely change our work. It's not just our next nice move. It's our next wise move. When we reach across barriers, it begins to give us the wisdom we need to change the way we think, the way we decide, and the way we act. And it ultimately gives us the results that we want from our work. Yes? So just two things real quick about reaching across barriers. One is, why do we need this reminder? Like, why do we even need somebody to say, why do we need that signpost that says, hey, reach across barriers, don't forget? One, why do we need it? And two, what are the massive benefits of reaching across barriers? And I'll tell you the reason we need it. I'm reading a book right now. It's called Habits of the Heart. Robert Bellah. It's written in the 80s. And he's just trying to get an overview of just American culture, which is equivalent to Western culture. You know, when Robert Bellah starts to survey and talk to people about, how we feel and what we think and how do we live our lives, really individualism is the thing that springs up that comes from our culture. And what Robert Bellah tries to describe to us is it's not just inherent in life. Not every human is born thinking, okay, individualism is absolutely how we should all be. But what Robert Bellah is saying is that is part of our culture. The subtitle of the book is actually Individualism and Commitment in American Culture. And so what he starts to find is that individualism and commitment sometimes are at odds. Sometimes we, in our culture, we want to be completely individualistic, but then there's this sense that we know there needs to be commitments in our lives. And so he starts to explore, how can somebody who is swept away by individualism also believe that we should all make commitments that we should keep, even if they're tough sometimes, even if they're not what's best for us. And see, with individualism, he describes it in two ways: expressive individualism and utilitarian individualism. And for us, utilitarian individualism, he says, is really like a manager. That's the representative in society. The manager who believes that, really their work is ultimately about climbing the ladder and their work becoming the thing that helps them reach the point in life where they can afford certain things about life. See, it's all about utility. It's all about what can work give me. In the physical world, materials, social status, those kind of things. And that's represented by a manager. But then he says there's expressive individualism, and that's represented by a therapist. And the therapist looks inside and says, what's in your heart? And I want to help you get what's in your heart out. It's why we say things like, man, you should follow your passions. See, that's not something that everybody in all cultures have always believed. That's not just a human concept, but that's a Western concept. It's something that we actually have developed almost in our subconscious. We can't get away from it. That, we need to look inside our heart and see what's there and then just let that out. Not that we need to really change our heart that much, but we think that we just need to see what's in there and then get that out there to the world and express our individualism. That's a really high virtue that we have. But see, that very thing is why we need this signpost. When we go so individualistic to look at our work as a way to climb the ladder, or we go so individualistic to look at ourselves and what's in our heart and just as a way to get that out there, not that we need to change in any way. See, while we need to absolutely have this signpost that reminds us to reach across barriers, because when we look at that in a very individualistic way, we start to only see the people around us who are like us. You see that? When I'm so focused on my individualism and my heart and how do I get to the top, now I'm either looking at people as a way to help me get to the top. So if you're across a barrier that doesn't help me get to the top, I'm not going to fool with you. That's what we're naturally doing right now in our culture. That's why we need the signpost. Or if I say, I just need to worry about what's in my own heart. So I only really connect with people who are very, very similar to me, because my individualism is such a high virtue for me. You see this? But that's why we need the signpost. We need it. Because really, if you think about it, think about any organization or culture that you've been in, Think about America itself, the melting pot. That's our claim to fame. The fact that we absolutely can take many different cultures and many different things, many different ideas, and all come together under some certain virtues. We know that that's absolutely helpful. We know that it's good. And so we need this signpost to say, reach across barriers. Don't get so caught up in you and your own, people who are just like you. We need to remember to reach across barriers. I know for us in our office, you guys know this in our office, it's been something that's been magical. When Daniela actually came on staff, I told her one day, there was a lady who was there, and we spent like 30 minutes with her, and she spoke Spanish. And if Daniela wasn't in the room, I never get to connect with this lady. But I told her when she left, I told Daniela, you remember this, Daniela. I told her, I said, thank you so much. And tears welled up in my eyes. I said, I never get to connect with that lady if it wasn't for you. And see, here's the massive benefits. I said we're going to talk about, one is why do we need the signpost, but two, what are the benefits? Look at the massive benefit from reaching across that barrier that now we're able to serve somebody's needs who doesn't even speak the same language as me because Daniela came into our office and she can speak Spanish. It's incredible the massive benefit that happens. When we start to reach across those barriers. I told Daniela, thank you for letting me enjoy this lady that was in our office. Thank you so much for letting me enjoy her, because I would have never been able to do it without you. I get to enjoy people that I never would have even been able to talk to because language was a barrier for me. But we were able to reach across that by bringing in a different person into the office, bringing in Daniela into the office who spoke English and Spanish. Same thing can happen with an office that is mostly male dominated. If there's a all male office, or if there's an all female office, and you start to say, look, we need some different perspective in here. We could reach across these barriers and hire in a different way that would give us, all the benefits of maleness and all the benefits of femaleness, all in the same building. If your office is filled with one race, if you start to diversify, but watch what happens in the community. The community even gets to see, man, look, there's some people who look like me now, because the community members, they're the same. They've been influenced by individualism just like you and I have. And so they begin to say, there's somebody who looks like me there. See how that benefits massively when we reach across barriers. Look, we get to connect with people we would have never connected with. That's a benefit in itself. But then we get to open up our businesses and our, to markets that have never been available. But we need the reminder, because otherwise we're just going to stick to anybody who looks like me, anybody who thinks like me, anybody whose heart's like mine. Thank you for listening. Hands-free drive to work. Today, before you think differently, before you act differently, before you learn to decide differently, you can absolutely say right now, today, I'm going to find one of these barriers normally that I wouldn't cross, and today I'm just going to cross it. You can do it today.